Welcome to Let's Talk Universal, a podcast sponsored by the UWI, a social enterprise that explores the positive workplace habits and behaviours that bring equality for all. And on this episode, I am joined by Estela Lugo, disability inclusion and design consultant, educator and advocate. Welcome to the podcast, Estela. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Erica. I'm super excited to be speaking with you across the sea today from the US. So thank you for having me.
No, it's wonderful to have you. And I think it would be great if we could just get right into it and start with, your background and why it is that disability is such an important part of your work.
Yeah, well, disability is something that I have grown up with my entire life. So it's been my normal, but it definitely has not been normal in regards to speaking openly about it and understanding the nuances and breaking barriers. It really started when I was about 3 or 4 years old. My parents noticed I was tripping a lot. It didn't seem normal. They took me to get checked out. And shortly after that, I was diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, which is not a dental disorder, although it has a very awkward name from the 3 scientists that discovered it. But yeah, it's basically a progressive neuropathy. So it really started affecting my feet, creating like this floppy effect when I walk. So it creates drop foot, affects the hands. And about a year or so later, around the age when I was entering school, I was using leg braces full time up to the knee. And so as a young child, it really didn't stop me. I was still running around and doing my best to keep up with the children around me. But for my parents, it was really scary. No one in my family had this disease, although it was hereditary. Both of my parents just happened to be the lucky genetic carriers of this specific mutation. And they had no idea what to expect. They didn't know if I was going to be able to continue to walk or live a quote unquote normal life. And then shortly after I was diagnosed, my sister was born. And she, in about 2 years, when she started walking, they started noticing the same thing. So it was kind of, they were blindsided twice from this disease. And so it's really all I've ever known. And it's been a really interesting journey, kind of understanding what my role and experience can bring to the disability community at large.
And from your kind of history, there's a particular focus on inclusive design. Why did you make that decision to kind of go down that path?
Yeah, looking back, I don't know if I consciously made that decision. I think my experience as a disabled child growing up, there were a lot of things that I could do, but there were a few things that I couldn't do. I was active in dance, I was active in softball and playing sports and swimming, but there came a point where those things became increasingly difficult for me, and I couldn't rely on being able to play sports or do a lot of those physical activities that really build community when you're a child. So you don't realize, all the friends that you make playing sports and your teammates and things like that. So I gravitated towards the arts, and especially when I had a very, pretty severe surgery when I was around 12 years old, where I was casted up to my legs. My legs were completely reconstructed, my feet were, and so I wasn't able to walk for about 12 weeks. And so during that time I was out of school, and all I had to do, there was no social media or anything like that, or internet. So I had construction paper and I had markers and I had my little creative art kit, and that's what I did. I drew and I made bracelets, and I did anything I can do to kind of keep those creative juices flowing. So that's kind of where the journey started into the arts and, my creative endeavors.
Yeah. And how has that then applied into the work that you're kind of doing and delivering for companies? You know, what does inclusive design look like?
Yeah. So really, from there, I wanted to be a fashion designer. And this had nothing to do with adaptive clothing or anything like that. I loved fashion. I thought it was so cool. And I told my high school teacher, I want to go to FIT in the city, New York City, and I want to study fashion. And then throughout those 4 years, while I was preparing to go to FIT, I realized how much sewing would be involved when my hands were affected again. And I knew that this was going to be something incredibly difficult for me to pursue with all of the small, motor functional activities that I would have to do. So I kind of shifted gears into interior design, and I ended up going to FIT for interior design. And through my 4 years there, I really gained an understanding of how you can create an environment and how you can shape people's experiences and elevate their quality of life through design. And part of that was making things accessible, right? And back then, in 2000 to 2002, when I graduated, there wasn't this big push for accessible design or inclusive design. It was kind of more of a whisper. It was kind of, well, make sure this space is accessible for a wheelchair. You have the 5-foot diameter in the bathroom and so on and so forth. But for me, that was really personal. I made sure that my designs would be accessible, that if there were stairs, there was also a ramp. And I learned as much as I could about the ADA. And so that was kind of my introduction to inclusive design. And then moving forward, it took a while for me to really circle back and connect my having a disability with my career, because even at that point, after I graduated and worked for interior design firms and design products, it was very siloed. It was, okay, this is my life as a disabled person, and this is my life for my career. And I kind of have to figure out how to navigate my disability in order to be a successful designer. And that I really experienced as being exhausting. Just being able to commute to an office in the city, or going out shopping all day for furniture, or being able to do small things with my hands in the office, and feeling like I had to hide that. Of course I had wonderful employers and colleagues, but I felt like, I couldn't be myself. I felt like I would be looked down upon or not as valuable to the company, or as a risk. And so it wasn't until I really went off on my own and I had children and I started working for myself, where I started to have more comfort in my own skin. And I started to take more risks as far as, well, what can I bring to the design world that hasn't been done before? How can I solve problems? Not just how can I make things pretty, but how can I solve problems that really matter? And that's kind of where that grew into a love of inclusive design.
Yeah, I went to Vienna a couple of weeks ago, and it was with the International Institute of Information Design, and talking about universal design. And one of the comments that was made that was really kind of profound to me was this idea that just because it's being made for a function or a purpose that helps someone who is disabled, or for any particular purpose, that just because it's functional doesn't mean it can't also be beautiful. There was one of the tutors was talking about a blind woman who, prior to going blind, she loved beautiful things, and she just says, I hate the fact that when I use these things that I can tell it's cheap and it looks horrible just by the way it feels. And so there's a real, just because it's practical doesn't also mean that it, can't also be beautiful and
right.
nice for that other person to use.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where the bias and the stigmas still happens subconsciously in the design world. And I'm not just talking about design of products or spaces or clothing. I'm talking about design as far as solutions, right? How do we design solutions, and whatever form that takes can vary, of course, but how do we begin to look at the problem first and design that? And there's this great saying, which I'm sure you've heard of, design for one, extend to many, which is really the whole curb cut effect, which I think really helps people understand how beneficial inclusive design is. It's not something that is a charity or just done as a feel good or something that people have to use separately. Just people with disabilities can use this, and then people without disabilities can use this. Really, it's something that can benefit everyone. So if you think of like the curb cuts on the sidewalks, those were designed for people with disabilities, but who else does that benefit? Well, it benefits people who are carrying, rolling large boxes around, or luggage, or parents with strollers, or people using scooters or skateboards. So this is solve for one, extend to many. And when we look at so many products that we take for granted today, voice to text, easy grip utensils, audiobooks, the Segway. I love this story about the Segway scooters that we all know, but that was originally designed for the iBot, which is the technology behind a wheelchair that was able to balance on two wheels and climb stairs. And so all of these things that are created by people with disabilities, for people with disabilities, is really something that benefits society as a whole and brings us closer to innovative solutions for everyone.
And I think that's the core reason, why this is important. Why companies should be taking notice. I suppose maybe I should just ask the question is, why should organizations and businesses, employers be considering this as part of their, how they create an inclusive workplace for their workers?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about the sheer size of this demographic, and then you ask a company, are you willing to not include a quarter of the population in your, whether that's purchasing your products or allowing them to work at your organization, you're leaving 25% of the diversity of problem solving, on the table. You're leaving 25% of consumers on the table. And in this day and age where competition is more fierce in the business world than ever, I haven't met a company yet that can say that they can afford to leave that type of business on the table. And not just, the business of inclusive design, but embracing employees with disabilities. And I think that's, we want to create a world that's more inclusive, but we have to look at our organization first, because if 1 in every 4 people have a disability, then are we having those conversations internally with our companies? Are we establishing that culture where our employees feel safe disclosing that they have a disability, asking for an accommodation that they need? I did a workshop a few weeks ago at a very large global brand, and I started out with a question: who here has had firsthand experience with disability, whether that's yourself or someone you love? And in a room of about 40 attendees, 1 person raised their hand. And then I went through the statistics, and then I went through all of the hidden disabilities, right? Now we're talking about rheumatoid arthritis, we're talking about long COVID, PTSD, hearing impairment, vision impairment, neurodiversity, autism, all of these things that we do not necessarily see when we first meet someone. And when I asked that question, about at least a quarter of the room raised their hands. So I think that's really where the disconnect is. We navigate the world thinking, well, where is this 24% of people, 25% of people that I hear so much about? Well, it's really important to dig deeper and to bring those hidden disabilities to the surface, because that is 80% of disability is hidden or unapparent to the eye. So I think that's, again, really helps people understand the sheer size of the population itself.
Absolutely. And I think that, as you say, it's one of the challenges of getting people to really understand the scope of this. It's not just those immediate kind of conditions or disabilities that people might consider like a wheelchair user.
Mm-hmm.
There are, the scope is much broader than that. So in terms of inclusive design, we'll move on to embrace it in just a second. But in terms of inclusive design, for those who might want to learn a bit more about it and to maybe start looking at how they can make those changes in their workplace or wherever it may be, where would you recommend they start? What would their first steps be?
I think it's really important for people to start where they are, right? So if they're a business that is designing products in any capacity, whether that's, beauty products or clothing, to start internally looking at what, let's say, their best-selling products are, and then building focus groups around that, bringing people to the table with disabilities, inviting employees to the table with disabilities, inviting outside organizations to test their product and to start the conversation and providing feedback on how they're using the product, how they're using the service, right? And just start organically, step by step, what can be improved here, what can be improved there. And then from there, that really is inclusive design, because you're bringing people to the table of all different types of abilities and then reiterating the product to serve more people in a better way.
Wonderful stuff. And thank you for sharing all of your experiences as well. I do appreciate you sharing that with all of us today. But let's just move on to Embrace It. So what I'd like to know now, Embrace It is the consulting that you're doing with your partner, Lainie Isbia. What was the moment? What was that situation, life event that brought you to launching that company? Was it a problem that you identified and that you're looking to solve?
Yeah. So again, everything happens really organically, I think, on this journey. So Lainie, I met a few years back, probably about 5 years now, 6 years, and she has Charcot-Marie Tooth as well. And we're around the same age. We, as an organization, I work for the Hereditary Neuropathy Foundation. We fund research and supportive programs for families with CMT. And we came across her blog that she had just launched about adaptive fashion with leg braces. So Lainie wore leg braces. She was a fashionista, and she was always on the search for clothing or shoes that would work for her leg braces. And she launched this blog, and we were like, "Oh my God, we've never seen this before. This is incredible." We reached out to her instantaneously. We were friends, and what more can we do together? And a few minutes later, we were hosting a patient summit. And at these patient summits, there's a lot about the research and providing resources and things of that nature. And we thought, what if we did something a little bit different? We understand as people in this community how difficult it can be to advocate for yourself, and how the emotional toll can take someone down a really dark path if they don't have the tools to ask for what they need or explain their disease or their disability in a way that feels good to them. And Lainie just so happened to have a background in social work. And so through these conversations, we were like, hey, what if we did a workshop on how to be more assertive about your disability? And so we did that. We launched our first kind of little workshop at the summit. Actually, it was a lot of attendees there with CMT, and we did role playing, and it was fun, and it was interactive, and it was engaging, and it was like something I had never seen before because it was positive. You could see people in the room were uplifted, and they were taking away tools that they could use in their everyday life, right? And so from there, we were like, oh, we cannot stop this. We have to keep this going. And we also realized that, of course, me and my sister both have this disease. We have always had each other to lean on and speak to about this, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have that support system where they can just say, I've had a really crap day today. And they don't have somebody who can say, I get it. I've been there. And so Lainie and I really wanted to share that friendship that we had between ourselves and bring that to people in case they didn't have somebody that they could just speak openly about, and not just always about their disability, but about relationships and dating and raising a family and having a career and all of these things that make us human beings and not just these people with disabilities. And so through that, we've developed workshops for brands. We've really created more focused inclusive design workshops and trainings. And we've just continued to really expand this mission that we're on, and empowering organizations, empowering people with disabilities to learn how to talk about disability, because without that first step, there is really little hope for any type of change, whether you're a huge global organization or if you're just a small, foundation looking to do more in the world.
And so when we talk about organizations that are looking to kind of take that first step and come to you guys, looking to have some workshops in their workplace, is there something that they're trying to achieve, that they kind of go, look, we're trying to do this, we think we should start here? What is that, do you think?
I think most organizations want to be inclusive. They want to take the first step. However, it can be very overwhelming. It can be very intimidating. They don't want any type of legal backlash, or they don't want to be canceled, or they don't want to say or do the wrong thing on social media or marketing campaigns. And so a lot of times the default reaction is to delay it or not do anything, or to put up, we support people with disabilities once a year for Disability Pride Month or anything like that. The intentions are there. The intentions are good, but there's a lot of fear. And I think that fear, whenever we speak with the organization, they may be saying, hey, we want to design inclusive line of clothing. And then when we speak to them a little bit deeper, they're afraid to say the word disability. They're still unsure. Speaking to us, can I say disability, or what do you prefer to say? And we're like, wait a second, hold up. If the C-suite and the leaders of this organization are not comfortable saying a disability, then we kind of have to take a few steps back and get everyone on the same page on, why does this matter? How does this affect us? Why should we care? How do we move forward? How do people with disabilities want to be addressed and spoken to? And then from there, everyone, you can see the fear kind of alleviate in the room, and people start to open up and say, hey, I never even thought about this person in my life that has MS, they have a disability, or I never thought about asking somebody if I could support them, how I could support them. And it gets really personal, because at the end of the day, disability, we say, is not about them, it's about us. Anybody can be disabled at any point in their life, temporarily, permanently. It's part of the human experience, just like family and career and all of the things that the milestones that a human being can experience throughout their life. A lot of times disability is part of that. So why not be proactive and include everybody in that conversation, and not just leave it for those people in the corner?
Yeah, and I think the fear and the anxiety is something that a lot of organizations do face when it comes to a lot of these topics within sort of the diversity and inclusion umbrella. I think that definitely exists. Throughout the rest of that process, though, with the fear at the beginning, are there any other, do you think, challenges or setbacks that companies have proceeding from that, initial
Yeah, I think just empowering the employees to speak up and take inventory of who in their organization feels comfortable disclosing their disability. How can they feel supported? Maybe that's creating an employee resource group. I think that's a great kind of organic way to start the conversation, to create allyship within the organization, to start to strategize and prioritize what the company goals are and how they can align the employee resource group with those goals, how they can start tapping into outside resources. So Lainie and I, we are not the be all and do all of everything, and inclusive and disability. We're just one or two steps in this evergreen process of becoming more and more inclusive. But we're a really important part, and that's starting that conversation. And then from there, we've had, the privilege of meeting dozens and dozens of disability professionals and advocates and experts in their fields. And so now we have this ever-growing network of people that we can bring in to regardless of where somebody's at in their journey, whether that's, okay, now we're ready to look into hiring more people with disabilities. How do we do that? And we're like, hey, we have a great resource and platform. Let me introduce you to this company here. And then they take it from there. Or, or we want a consultant on some disability clothing or adaptive clothing. How can we create a focus group? Well, we have these people here. So it's really about strengthening the network from within, starting with employees and then branching out from there.
And I think it's perhaps clear how this benefits employees. I think we've already mentioned some of those points already, but I think organizations would want to know, how does it, benefit them as well? What are the outcomes for an organization of having this kind of intervention?
Yeah, I mean, the retention, employee retention goes up. I think it's about 25% retention. Employee satisfaction goes up because now they understand that they can feel safe in their organization and that they can speak up, and they're not going to burn themselves out to the point where it's going to affect their health, right? I think that's important nowadays, especially after COVID, is that employees want to know that their health is a priority for the company. And there's a lot of programs that, yoga, free yoga or things like that, for healthy food in the lunchroom. But if somebody has a disability and they don't, or chronic illness, and they don't feel, safe disclosing that, there's a lot of stress, added stress that employees can experience. Flexibility in scheduling or working is, we all know after COVID how important that is, or the option to work from home, even if that's hybrid. All of these things really add up to employee happiness, employee productivity. And nowadays, the transparency of a company is really important for the consumer, right? We don't want to just see some token messaging. We want to know that the employees behind the curtain are being taken care of, that, that health is a priority, that the product is safe, right, for the users. So all of these things start to come to the surface. So it's just smart business. It really is at the end of the day.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, those are common themes in these conversations that we've had so far on the podcast, is that actually, it's astounding that organizations haven't clocked onto this sooner, because, all of these great benefits come from being more inclusive and prioritizing employee well-being and career progression and those kinds of things. It's from everyone I've spoken to, that seems to be the message. So when it comes to organizations learning how to talk about disability, what are the key things do you think that leaders need to perhaps understand or consider?
I think more so than talking is being able to listen, right? Is to ask the questions within the organization, ask what they can do better. And, I like the 80-20 rule. Listen 80% of the time, speak 20% of the time. Really, I'm constantly learning every day about disability inclusion. There's no end to understanding this such a complex topic and the complexity of human diversity that's changing every day, and understanding the intersectionality of what it means to be a human being, that somebody, there's layers of privilege in our identity, and there's whether that's economical or disability or race or gender, all of those things tie into what a person is. So it's really important to listen and to bring people in that can speak to their experiences, right?
Yeah. People, like yourselves who live the experience and have, careers built on this. And, so I suppose for organizations who are looking to start that journey towards disability inclusion, what I'm kind of getting is the first step on that journey, but is there something that they need to do first or at the same time? What do you think?
I think it's just taking that first step, having the conversation, taking the leap of faith. And I understand a lot of organizations will use like Disability Employment Awareness Month as an opportunity to have these conversations. Hey, we've never had this conversation before. Let's just open the doors to a speaker and let's feel out what the reaction is. And let's start taking baby steps on how we can activate meaningful change. And let's ask internally, take inventory of what we can do better, and just slowly start to do that, and getting all of the departments involved too. This is not just allocated for human resources as well. It really needs to be all hands on deck, starting with leadership down, because it needs to be presented as a priority, and that really needs to be organically communicated from the people at the top, saying, hey, this is the kind of culture that we want to have here. This is part of growing that culture.
And I think that is reflected also in the event that we ran in October, which was about neuro-inclusion specifically. But I think the overall takeaways are similar across diversity and inclusion, which is that executive buy-in is really important, to have those champions of all types of diversity in the leadership team to kind of be a part of that driving force that helps to bring the awareness, that helps to kind of put some pressure behind these programs in organizations. So I think that's becoming more obvious the more that we speak to people in any way. But before we finish, we're obviously getting close to the end of 2023. 2024, do you see any kind of changes happening, or perhaps more interest in disability inclusion? What do you think 2024 is going to bring?
I'm excited. I think we have been seeing this, just immense representation of people with disabilities. And of course, it's not just representation. Representation, I like to say, is like the tip of the iceberg, and everything underneath it is really what authentic inclusion is, like the culture. Then from there, what the public sees is the representation. But I think the representation and the willingness of big brands to start to understand the importance of inclusive design. Like, I take example for Victoria's Secret just launched their first line of inclusive lingerie. And I see that as, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think it's really starting to break down those cultural stigmas of people saying, oh, wait, people with disabilities can be attractive and sexy too, or people with disabilities can be, a leading actor in a movie, and that's not just about their disability, right? Like, there's, I think we're starting to have more exposure of the diversity within the disability community and experience, and it's starting to be celebrated more, and that's exciting, And of course, all of the work that has to happen behind the scenes is not the stuff that maybe you and I see that every day, but it takes a lot of work to get to that point where, there's a billboard of a model with a disability for big brands. But that just can't be a shortcut to inclusion. That's the end result. That's the byproduct.
Yes, absolutely. And I really do hope that upward trend continues into 2024 and beyond. And I think your point is that this is a journey. We're not going to get it right first time, and even the evolution of humankind is that we're continuously improving and learning and doing new things. Social topics always shifting, so I think there's definitely some more way to go anyway. Thank you anyway for answering all of my questions. It's been wonderful to chat to you, but before we finish, I did just want to kind of give you the opportunity to touch on anything that perhaps we haven't covered or that you'd like to raise for our audience.
Sure. If anyone is in the Charcot-Marie-Tooth, experience, they can contact the organization that I work for, which is the Hereditary Neuropathy Foundation. We're doing a lot of incredible work there, not just for people with CMT, but a lot of resources that anyone with a disability can benefit from, things like adaptive driving to accessible college, to all of the things that just can help support us a little bit better. So I definitely encourage anyone to visit hnf-cure.org to learn more about the research and the programs there. And just check out our podcast as well. It's called Embrace It. We interview some incredible change makers there with all different types of disabilities, and just really highlight the key takeaways of their journey and what their learnings have been, and hopefully people can apply that to their own lives. And just, we are not alone on this journey of disability, that there's so many out there. And just, it's so important to communicate and to connect with community for that support, because it's really can make all the difference in thriving with a disability.
Wonderful. Well, Estela, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and talking about the work that you're doing with Embrace It and, your experience with inclusive design. I'm sure our audience will agree that it sounds incredibly interesting and it's been incredibly valuable. If anyone would like to find out more or get in touch, as you previously mentioned with the links, we will attach all the relevant links to the website on our with our podcast page. But thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much. And Erica, congratulations for all of the work that you and your team are doing. I know we've only met recently, but I'm really impressed and blown away by how quickly you are all expanding and the incredible events that you're already able to host and share with the community. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
No, I appreciate it. And I really look forward to collaborating with you more, speaking with you more, have you at some of our events. I think it's going to be 2024 is going to be a really interesting year for all of us, I think.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you, Estela. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.